I didn't even know what to say because I was just bruised, like everything hurt, you know. And I still had 20 kilometers left, and it was like 5 p.m. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. My mantra this time was the word again. I can't tell you how many times I said the word again.
You've ran across Europe, and now we are here talking about it. Would you prefer to still be out there running?
My girlfriend's
Who's
not in
looking
the
at
house,
you?
so yeah, I miss the van a lot actually. My name is Jake Catterall. I just ran the entire length of Europe from the north of Norway to the south of Spain.
I think one thing that everybody as runners loves is stats. And to kind of put some perspective on what we're going to talk about here, I think that's a good idea. Hit me with the stats of the journey. I'm talking countries, mileage, time, how long you were out there for, anything you think would be interesting and relevant.
Okay, well, the daily distance per day was just short of a double marathon. So I was running 70 kilometers every single day. The target was 75 days, roughly. I got an injury that halted the project for a week, which was quite bad, which we can talk about later. Um, but then I ended up finishing in 94 days. So my total time of running, the project time was 94 days. I was running roughly on average between 6 and 7 per kilometer for the first kind of 3 weeks. And then that improved up as fast as even 5 per kilometer towards like the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks even of the trip. So I actually got fitter like as I went on.
How do you even go about planning something like this? Because, like you said already, things go off plan. It was supposed to be 75 days, ended up being just over 90. But, like, take me back to before you're even on the start line in Norway. Like, how do you get to that point?
Yeah, well, you know what? That question is exactly why I'm doing everything that I'm doing. So, for some context, um, I have I've always been really inspired by adventurers, athletes, explorers, what have you. And I love watching documentaries about people doing this kind of stuff. And one thing that I always found incredible about watching these documentaries is that when I was watching them, I couldn't have been any more inspired. I was just like, wow, one day I'm going to do that. And then I watched it, and you know, you get to the end, and you're like, "Wow, they're amazing!" You feel so enriched by what they've done and inspired. And then you turn the TV off, and then you start thinking about actually like what they actually did and how they got there. And then I'm just lost in so many questions, like how did they afford it? How did they get there? Why did they do that particular event? And like so many whys pop up, and then you start to research them a little bit, and their background's so vague. You don't really know like how they like yeah did anything. So I actually spoke to a friend of mine. I work in advertising and marketing, and I have a director friend who basically just said to me, why don't you actually just document like your entire journey from today onwards, like whatever you want to do, like if you want to climb El Capitan or cross Antarctica or whatever, just start the process now and document everything. So to answer your question specifically about like how did you get to this point and how did you plan it? Well, my purpose really is to create a kind of answer to how did he get there, you know. So my big dream is that I want to cross Antarctica alone. That's what my big vision is, and it's what I've wanted to do for many years. And getting to the start line of running across Europe is a stepping stone towards that. I want to show people that it actually takes a long time and a lot of build up process in order to complete those dreams.
To say that that's a stepping stone is mad. Because, for a lot of people, and for a lot of people listening to this, a marathon might be the one thing, or a 50 miler, or a 100 miler, or even, running their first 5K. And that's the beautiful thing about goals, isn't it? That everybody can have their own goal. Your goal can be crossing Antarctica. Someone else's could be to lace up their trainers and go out after listening to this. The beauty of goals is that everybody's goal is different.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? Like I at first, my one of my first big major goals, kind of like a few years ago, was to complete an Ironman. I'd never even done a triathlon before, or a half, or an Olympic distance, or whatever. I just went straight in, like went for the Ironman, and that was like probably the biggest acceleration in life I think I've ever experienced. And after that, I tried to really push people towards going after a goal of like that gravity. I was like, no, you should do it because it changed me and it would change you. And I really pushed a lot of like maybe too much into people going that far. And actually, I've kind of come out of that process being like everyone is very individual, and what you get out of a goal that you set yourself that you're really passionate about, be it the marathon or even a 20K or whatever it is, it's all relative, so you set the goalpost for yourself, and actually you pretty much get out the same thing, no matter what goal you choose, but it has to be just a bit out of your comfort zone.
What is it about putting yourself through, whether it's mental or physical hardship? Why does that help you in all different aspects of life? Because that is something that does happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, like, my assumption is that most people have some sort of self belief or self dream that one day they'll accomplish something. That's my like general blanket philosophy of most people, and I think that going and pushing yourself through a marathon or something that's physically difficult just puts you into it forces you to answer that question, like, who am I, what am I capable of? And it's quite a one-to-one measurement. Like, you
Yeah.
set the goal and you get out of it exactly what you put in, so again, it's all very relative, but I think nowadays we do lack a bit of like challenge in our lives. A lot of society is set up to be quite soft. It's there's lots of frameworks. There are a lot of ways that we can be protected, and actually putting yourself through like some really physical pressures can really build you as a human being.
Does it feel weird now that, we've already mentioned you sitting on the sofa watching some docs and then thinking, how do these people do it? You're going to be the person that people are looking at now or listening to. Is that a strange thing that kind of that full circle journey has happened?
Yeah, like that for me is an incredible compliment, and I hope that does happen because like I'm coming with like solutions to these questions because I know that people will be asking how, so in everything I do and everything I make, I also provide those questions to people. So I don't want to just leave it as like, hey, this is an inspirational story, you should get running. It should be more like, cool, you want to run a 50K, like how did Jake do it, like where did he find the inspiration, like why did he push himself that far.
Mate, I feel like you're going to be like A to Z of Adventurer's Guide.
That could be nice. Well, I mean, we called this project Way Beyond, and Way Beyond basically came from a snippet of me running a 200-kilometer ultra run. I got very unlucky because the dates that we planned this run on, it happened to be a heat wave in the Netherlands where I did it. It was in the middle of COVID. We couldn't really change the dates. It just had to happen that weekend because everything kept opening and closing, and you could hang out with people, you couldn't hang out with people, and we just had to do it basically. And it was savage. It was so hard. Everyone who wanted to run with me as a support runner, they dropped out at least 50% less of the time that they wanted to run with me. Because it was too much. Yeah, 38 degrees, 40 degrees. Yeah, and the snippet came from me having like an absolute meltdown, and I was dizzy, I was all over the place, and I was just saying to the camera, that like this is way beyond anything that I've ever done before. But in my head, I was like, but I'm still going to go and I'm still going to finish. And we talked about this phrase being something that's quite like relatable. I know
Yeah.
that a lot of people have been in marathon situations or race conditions where they are like beside themselves, but they know like it doesn't really change the fact that they will get to the end, you know? So Way Beyond became that like that moment.
And when you hit way beyond, you never really hit way beyond, do you? Because you kind of constantly open more doors to what is further, and that's
Yes.
obviously something you've shown already. And
Yeah.
it was like really interesting there to hear you say about like 38-degree heat. It had to be done at that point, and these things and these challenges are something that you've got to overcome when you're in the middle of whether it's a 200-kilometer run or running the length of Europe. You've already mentioned the injury. How did that change your plans, and how did you adapt on the fly?
Well, I can answer that kind of both in two ways. One, first of all, adaptation to each goal, right? So yeah, you're right. It's never really over. You know, people say like, "Is this it? Like, is this the end? Like, is this
No.
the pinnacle?" And like, it never will be, because you always will change the goalposts. You know, like at first the marathon was the pinnacle of running, you know, and now like the Moab like 240 is now the pinnacle of running, you know, and it's like changed so dramatically. And I think when you when you complete something, like that becomes your measurement of success from now on, you know, like you look back at yourself and say, okay, well, could I withstand running a marathon? Well, once you run a marathon, you can pretty confidently say, I can withstand a marathon. So then the question is, what else can I withstand, you know?
Yeah,
So that always changes. And yeah, I think something else that I'd like to add to that is about like mental strategies as well. I focused a lot of time on creating like a kind of network of support systems for how I get myself through very difficult moments. So that could come in the vein of like uh, David Goggins has like a very famous cookie jar philosophy where he draws on very positive memories in very hard moments to get him through hardship. And I've built like sort of like a big network of those kind of things to get me through hard times. I think about people in my life. I try to smile when it's really difficult. I try to I sing a lot. Singing is a big thing.
yes.
It's really funny. Like it kind of overrides everything and pulls me out of bad situations. And all of these things are quite intricate and they're very personal to you. And something I learned on this specific trip was singularity. I think that's become like a huge steerer for my next project, which is trying to bake everything down to one word and one mantra. And my mantra this time was the word again. I can't tell you how many times I said the word again.
Okay.
I was like running up a hill in the worst conditions you've ever seen, hardcore rain, uphill like you've never seen before. And I'd run, and then I'd stop and start walking. And I'd be like, no, I can't do it again. And I would start going again. I'd run again and I'd run. I'd be like, okay, I'm just going to make it to that tree. And I get to the tree and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted again. And I would like shout it in my head, you know. And people ask me, how do you get through hard moments? Well, I just say again. And it's something interesting how a simple word can completely like just drum that like but drum beat and get you going.
And it's weird, isn't it? Because they kind of they kind of come out of nowhere, those things. Like it would have been at some point you were out there and you were just kind of in a place where you needed that again, and suddenly again comes to you, and then that becomes the thing.
Yeah.
Will that be something that you continue to use, do you reckon? Is it going to be like a Nick Bear go one more moment? Like,
Yeah.
is that something? Because they're kind of, when you think about those two, go one more and again, very similar in that sense. Like, it's that messaging, and you can you can relate again to not only, athletic endeavor, but
Yeah,
everyday life as well. Because sometimes you don't want to get up and go to that Monday morning meeting, but you've got to do it. You've got to
yeah.
tell yourself again, because that's how life keeps rolling.
Yeah. Well, that's like what you said earlier about like why do you go through these kind of physical endeavors and how does it like apply to you as a human being? Well, I mean, that phrase used in a vision-based way,
Yeah, yeah.
and I want to be specific there. Like if you're grounded in the things that you want to do, and you can apply words like again to the things that really move you, and it's like a mission and a goal that you set for yourself that you know you'll get of that, all that you want from it. I set the running across Europe because I wanted to get something out of this. Like this was a huge test for me, and I planned it. I spent a lot of time baking that idea. But I think using phrases like again when you're in a situation you don't want to be in, a shitty job or something that really takes away from your life, I think that using it in the wrong way like that could then be problematic, you know?
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I
that
think it
makes
has
sense.
to be used in a very focused manner.
You just said about, getting out of this journey, you wanted to get something out of it, and obviously that was always going to be the case. But you sitting here with me now, to you standing on the start line, how were you a different person, and what have these experiences changed in you, I guess?
Um, that's a good question. I think my biggest change in myself is not knowing not knowing the answer is something that I've come out of this because I went into this project being like, cool, I've done the training, I've done the planning, I've done the vision, I've done all of the creative concept, I've got the right people involved, I've got everything. I know all the answers. I need to do a certain amount of mileage per day. I need a certain amount of calories, like all answer based thinking, right? But of course, as soon as the project started, it was chaos. There was a 5-day storm that happened in Norway as we were driving up to the start line. It removed the main highways of Norway, like the main entry and exit points. Um, there weren't very many people around. My knees had some issues in the first week. Um, I had my girlfriend support me for a while, but then she left, and then it was just me and my crew member. His name's Roy, who was driving and shooting the whole project. But like, there's teething problems there. Like, there was no real answer to anything, and everything was always chaos. Like, where do we sleep at night and everything? And because that has just happened throughout the whole project, like I've really just not known what's going to come the next like 6 hours. I now finish the project being like, well, actually, being comfortable with not knowing the answers is also quite a good thing.
If you haven't seen, by the way, and I'm speaking to anybody listening right now, the content, the best way I think to go and digest some of it is head to Jake's Instagram page. There's loads of links on there. And I did want to mention the content because the production values throughout the journey were obvious to see.
Mm,
And everything I kept thinking when I was seeing stuff was like, how's Jake keeping his head on running 70k a day and the stuff that's going out, the stuff that is also like pretty much a full-time job when running is a full-time job too. How
yeah.
did you compartmentalize both things?
Well, so we are like a small team for this particular project. So there is like two project managers, a creative wing, which was some people helping out with like titles and like some creative concepting of like what like ideas we should shoot and everything. And then obviously there's Roy who's photographing the content and everything. And then he was also shooting film, which was also being made into YouTube edits. But we didn't have a particular like one strict editor. We had to
Yeah.
then find editors for each episode as well, which we were figuring out as we went. But honestly, like I was taking potential business and sponsorship calls on the road as I was running. I was
Yes.
I was making calls like to figure out like can we go a certain way on the highway because of like highway laws and whatever. Um, the team were asking us where we wanted to sleep at night, and they were calling me being like, do you want to stay in this place or that place? And I would have to take those calls always, you know. And I had to like call my mates from the road again to say like, hey, do you want to help us do the YouTube edit and everything? So I when you say separate or like put these things apart from each other, they weren't apart. They were
No,
like I was running and doing calls all at the same time.
they were
And like
chucked all in a bowl.
yeah, and when I finished my running day, like obviously it didn't end there either, because I then had to sort of like creative direct the images that we were putting out online. Like, are they all just images of Jake running, or like can we make them a bit put more personal? Like, can it be about nutrition or food, or you know? So we had a whole like 3 hours from 7 till 9 or 10 to do all the content creation and eating food and showering and finding somewhere to sleep. And we didn't go to bed every night until like 11, 12, 12:30.
Without the running, though, nothing else happens. Like none of that happens. So, like, did it ever become too much? Did it ever become like, look, I just need to focus on 100% resting, recovering, running?
Well, I can take you back to answer that very easily. Is no, it never got too much. I love it. I'll give me more. Like that's how I feel about that.
Yeah.
But to give you some context, is that like I read this book called Designing Your Life a few years, quite some years ago now, and it basically kind of gets you to look at like three legs of your life, like three pillars of your life, and they even say it's going to take a little while to really be solid on what those three things are. And mine kind of came out being um, something to do with sport and athlete, something to do with creative, um, and something to do with like people and new business. Like they were like my three kind of legs to my life. You know what I mean? So if you can choose events and work and what you do with your life, always through the sphere of those three things, then you will basically enjoy like whatever comes your way. So this run was all about finding people. Like the run itself was called Running Europe Together. Like the whole positioning of the run was let's do it with people. So I spent my whole life on the road trying to contact people, find sponsors, get people involved. So that's one part of the pillar. I was obviously running every day, which was the other pillar. And the creative part was we were making film and shooting the project and making a whole documentary out of it. So from my perspective, I'm like, yeah, it sounds tough, but it's my life, so I want more of it.
I know you were doing meetups in certain places as well and things like that. And obviously going through these different countries, these different cultures, these different environments. How did that feel to you? Because I imagine it felt like a huge privilege to be able to experience so much in actually quite a short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, first, I would say that like the people side of this project was incredible. It was something that I also didn't really consider as being something as big as it was on this project. It was unbelievable. Like I think the people gave more to this project than everything else. Like finding people along the road, sharing the road with someone who just randomly comes and finds me. I mean, whenever would that happen? Like you can't plan for that
Yeah.
stuff. And then when you arrive in cities and there's like between 10 and 80 people was the most people we had like in one group run. It's it's absolutely wild. And to provide some inspiration to people to put their shoes on from their life and make some time for you to like come out and join whatever you've crafted, like yeah, you're right, it is a huge privilege, but it also does make me wonder about like what people's motivation are, and I have to say going through each town, especially each city, um, I did notice that a lot of people kind of come into these things with a similar mindset, which is people are all trying to figure life out, and the desire to join a mission like this, people feed off the energy of someone who's like hyper focused and kind of like knows where they want to go. And I think a lot of people in life, and I'm not saying all the runners who joined are like this, but something that I've kind of come away with is that people really want to know how to get that for themselves. And I think that's wonderful, you know. And if I've provided even just a tiny bit of that to people, then I think that's a win in my book.
I love the word project. It's something you use a lot, and a lot of adventurers use the word project. And I
My
always find it
girlfriend
quite,
hates it.
I know, I find it quite interesting though, because a project's something you finish, right? That you complete. Like if you're at uni or at school, you have a start, you have the time you're working on the project, and then you have the time you're handing in a project. And now you're home. I know there's going to be a lot of things that remain to do, like this, talking about it, and that helps it live on. But is it kind of sad that that part of the project is done? Like you've crossed the finish line, you've ran across Europe, and now we are here talking about it. Would you prefer to still be out there running?
uh, my girlfriend's
Who's
not in the
looking at
house,
you?
so
Yeah.
yeah, I miss the van a lot actually. No, I I made a mistake when I completed my first Ironman. That the end of the Ironman was the most important part of the Ironman. Like completing the Ironman was like the mecca of all things in my head, and I was uh, quite disappointed when I finished the Ironman because there was things that I could have done differently. I was like, "Well, everyone's going to flock to me in their millions and congratulate my incredible achievement and all of this," and it wasn't the case. And I realized that it's really, like, as cliche as it sounds, like it really isn't about the ending. And the more I've done ultra events, the more I've completed my own dreams and what have you, it's way more about like the daily aspect of the run itself. And for me, the ending is just another, like, it doesn't really matter to me as much anymore. Like when I finished the run, I was like, cool, like I'll just go grab a cocktail and then we can just do whatever, you know. But like, it's not like a closing of the book for me, you know. I haven't, like, I don't feel sad. I don't feel good about the end either. I actually have just like a huge, incredible memory of this run being fantastic for 94 days.
And is it a desire to go and do more things like this? Things
Hell
like
yeah.
this just strengthen that I'm going to do this. This is the main goal, and I want to do this. You've already kind of mentioned the main goal or something
Mm.
you've always thought about. What do you think it's going to be like following that, though? Do you think there's going to be more goals after that, or what do you think kind of
Yeah.
your journey is going to be?
Yeah, hell yeah. There's always more. Give me more. That's
Well, again,
that again. You know, I think that there is something happening with young people today, which is we are somehow promoting ourselves to steer away from physical and mental hardship. And I think that that is not the right way to live our lives. I think the more that we sharpen our tools on how to deal with physical and mental hardship, I think the better people we will become by the end of it. So I think that training physical elements to our lives, like marathons and anything in that sphere, will actually improve ourselves as human beings the more we pursue them. So from my perspective, like every time I complete an event, the more it hardens me up for what life has to throw at me. You know, a life problem 5 years ago now is an absolute nothing problem to me today, because I've gone through stuff that like people just can't even imagine,
yeah.
you know, and that prepares you for real life, you know.
What was the lowest point there out on the road?
I think, uh, well, I think something to do with um, everyone said that Spain was going to be like the best part. It's going to be hot. There's going to be olive trees. There's going to be sunshine. It's going to be amazing. And it was anything but that. It was we arrived into Spain as this storm siren or storm siren or something was hitting the UK and Central Europe, right? But of course, I didn't have any days off, and I had to keep running through this storm. And there was probably a 4 day block where I ran against probably a 50 to 60 kilometer per hour headwind for those days. So there was no, and this was headwind, and this isn't gusts. This is like full on wind the whole time.
Wind tunnel.
Yeah. I was on a highway, and there was no other choice to run on any other roads. So to add it all up into one, it was I had the 50 kilometer per hour winds. I was on a highway with oncoming traffic coming the other way. It was raining. I had to run up 1,000 vertical meters in the day. And because it was raining and all the trucks that were on the road, they would throw up like an incredible amount of spray. But each truck also carried with it a phenomenal wind strength that would either follow on the front of the truck or the back of the truck. And it wasn't very predictable where the wall of wind was going to come from. So I was losing weight like no other, like on this project to keep the calories on and everything. So in Spain, I was weighing around 62 kilograms, which is not a lot. But to be 62 kilograms and running against that wind and the walls of wind that would follow the trucks, it would physically take me off my feet. Like that's how strong it would. It would lift me off the ground every time a truck would come by. So the only way to defend that was to kind of like go as small as I could, go into a ball and just try and like cut through, you on like an aero bike or whatever. So I cut through these walls of wind. But again, like you didn't know if they were on the front or the back of the truck. So I would just try and like guess. I would be like, right, I think this time it's going to be on the front, and I'd ball like this. The wall of wind wouldn't hit me. I would release, and then the wall would hit me. And I had to do that for like 9 hours, And a lot of these trucks, because of the spray, they wouldn't see a runner on the road. And also, why would there be a runner on the road in the middle of a desert in Spain? So they weren't looking for me, and the spray was ridiculous. And I remember just kind of having enough of this for like 5 hours, and I sat in the back of the van with Roy, and I didn't say a word to him. I kept my glasses and my hood on, and I just had my head back on the rest, just being like, I didn't even know what to say because I was just bruised, like everything hurt, and I still had 20 kilometers left, and it was like 5 p.m. and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And I just had this mantra in my head saying again. And I was like, I just have no choice. I have to keep going, and I can't stop here. So I just slid the door open, and I kept going until 60 kilometers. And there was a reroute around this particular mountain. It was either an extra 5 kilometers to go around a mountain, or it was 5 kilometers to go over the top. But it would mean running an extra 500 meters elevation on top of this day, which, as you can imagine, was like really rough. But in my book, I was just like, okay, well, there's a lesson here. You can either take the depressing, longer, less elevation route and just be sad and cry to yourself for like the next hour and a half, or you can seize the moment, take charge of your emotions, and find a lesson in going over this mountain and add that on top of how difficult your day is, because then you take charge. It's your choice. You put yourself into that situation. Everything else is exterior today, but this mountain is your challenge, and you can take charge of the day. So, of course, I chose the mountain, and by the time I got to the bottom, I was buzzing. I was loving life. Songs were back on. I was singing like Snoop Dogg, Gin and Juice, and like all this mad stuff. So that it's always a constant reminder that it's like it's all your choice at the end of the day. You can either be in the poopy pants mentality, or you can choose to take charge and get out of it what you want.
Where does this come from, mate? Because like we've spoken for 35 minutes now, and it's obviously very, very clear to see that you have got this incredible mental resilience.
Mm.
A lot of people would have stayed in the front of that van and not gone back out for that 20K. A lot of people wouldn't have overcome the injury and would have canned a project like this.
Mm.
Like, it must come from somewhere. Do you know where it comes from?
Um, that's a good question. I think at school I was always kind of I always thought a bit outside the box, generally speaking. I think I definitely didn't follow the traditional learning path at school. I think that's probably one way of putting it. So I was, I was always a bit up in the clouds. It wasn't to say that I wasn't smart, but I definitely just had my own way of approaching stuff, and I like to find out all of those answers myself. And I loved adventuring, and whilst people loved to play football, I was always like out on my mountain bike, cycling up a crazy hill or cycling down a crazy hill. So there was always like an element of thrill that I always loved. And I think what comes from thrill is that you tend to fall off your bike and you have to get back up, but like you love the thrill so much that you have to keep going. So I think that's always been like a big foundation of my life, that I just love getting after it. Like no matter what, even if I do break my arm or whatever, I just love being outside. And the more I've like lent into all of the stuff that I've naturally been talented as a kid, as I'm older, the more I've just like got out of life.
Talk to me about the injury then. How did you get through that? And did it ever threaten this project?
Yeah, the injury was just came out of nowhere. So I was in Norway and I'd ran up this like huge fjord. The fjords were mad because you had to just keep running up and down and up and down like the whole time. So each day was like 70K, but then it was like on average 1,000 meters vertical climbing. And it was just like, that was just how the day was. And I was running down a hill, and I got this like kind of cutting, like a big line, a cutting feeling across the front of my quad. But honestly, mate, by this point, like everything hurt. My feet hurt, my shoulders hurt, my back hurt. Like I was just like, we'll throw it in the mixer because
Yeah,
like
just another thing.
it's just another thing.
Yeah.
So I took three more steps, and it was like really cutting, and I was like, oh, this is different than the others. And then I ran three more steps again, and I was like, wow, this is not the same as all the other ones. This feels different. So I just stopped in the car for a minute and was like, okay, maybe we should just have a rest. And as soon as I got back on the road after the rest, it was very apparent that it was still there. Now, the thing is, I, as training, I love doing varied training. So I love boxing and I love studying boxing. I love watching boxers and I love learning about how boxers work mentally. And I basically take on a lot of their philosophies in like endurance sports. I'm just like, I will go until I'm completely knocked out. Like that's how far I'm prepared to go. Um, so I just kept running, and I was like, okay, this is actually a really bad injury, but like that's not going to stop me because I'll go until I'm knocked out, right? So we stopped the project a little earlier that day, and I was obviously in a bad way. So I asked my team, I was like, right, what should we do? Because we're kind of like on the verges here. And this had actually continued after this pain for like some days. Like this had actually been a problem for a while. And I asked the team, right, we should probably make a kind of like strike system. Like strike one should be if you have a pain and then you get up the next day and it's still there, that's strike one, right? And that goes on for strike like 3 days. And when I first experienced this pain, we were now like 4 days afterwards, right? This is when I was asking my
Yeah,
team.
yeah.
And I said to my girlfriend, like, yeah, we should make the strike system because I'm my worst enemy. So we should try and find a way out of this. And my girlfriend went, yeah, that's a great idea, Jake, but you're already on strike four.
Yeah.
So like we should probably already call it quits, you know? So they kind of made the call off my own stupidity. And we took those 5 days off. And actually, as soon as I came back, the pain had gone. Like it was very odd.
I was going to say, mate, like you were always going to be on strike one. Like every day you're going to wake up. this hurts, this hurts, this hurts, this
Yeah.
hurts. There was never going to be a time though you weren't striking.
Yeah, and something that I have learned on this longer distance runs, and any listeners who are into long distance, like honestly, the playbook for long distance has not been written, and it's also so unique. Also, and I think a lot of sports science is all an agreed term that we've all kind of agreed that we need a certain amount of gels and a certain amount of carbs per hour, and we need to put this amount of heart rate into a certain amount of physical output. In all honesty, like on my project, all of the sports science made no sense at all. I was eating all sorts of different stuff. Like I didn't take one sports gel like the whole time. I was just eating sausages and pasta and avocados and eggs and drinkable calories like chocolate milk, and that provided me with a healthy gut the whole time. Like taking gels every day for 90 days, I can pretty much assure you that's not going to end well.
The interesting thing with like nutrition is, isn't it, when you're in scenarios like that? I mean, I've never been in a scenario where I've run quite the distance you've been running back to back, but you just want to eat what you want to eat, don't you?
Yeah.
You don't want to kind of, you don't want to be forced into taking on stuff that you don't want, because you're in such a delicate space anyway mentally. You just want that as kind of like your reward system sometimes.
Yeah. But that reward system is, you actually know exactly, your body knows what it wants.
Yeah.
And you can provide it quite easily just based on feeling. So whatever your body is telling you it needs, it is exactly what it is in your brain. Like you have an urge, you want something, and you just provide it to the body. And my kind of three pillars were: do I need sugar? Do I need carbs? Or do I need salt? That's basically like where what I my three answers were. So I got an urge, and I was like, "Damn! Like this one feels like like a dip in carbs." So I would go and get to the van. I'd smash a bunch of pasta, and I would go, "Okay, well, I've read that signal correct, or I've read that signal wrong." Well, if I read it wrong, then it can only be two other things. It needs to be some sort of gummies or sugary drink, or I need something like more like salty, like more. It could be like a yeah, like a Powerade or something that's more electrolyte focused. So it's actually not that complicated. When you feel bad, it can only, for me, it can only kind of be those three areas.
I know we've kind of spoken about like the finish not being the finish, but what was that moment like?
Uh, um, it was interesting. The finish line was interesting. Like I got to Tarifa, and it was an incredible feeling to think about where we'd come from. Like I ran all the way from north of Norway, like the most northern part of Europe. You have to understand how far away that is. It's so far. So to see the ocean on the Spanish side was an emotional moment. It was like to see who I'd ran with. I ran with hundreds of people like throughout this whole journey who wanted to come and find me on the route. So seeing the ocean was a good like look back into like who I'd ran with, the messages I'd got from saying people saying this has changed my life, and I want to try things bigger. So the ending was all about the memories of what I'd actually achieved, but like the actual crossing the line moment like didn't make much difference to me. I just crossed the line and I was like, cool, well, that's the project done. But it was the memory, the things that I'd created, which was more meaningful to me.
Mate, we'll finish with this because it's so inspiring what you've done, and like it's really, really cool to hear you talking about at the beginning of this conversation, wanting other people to go and do things like this and to apply certain aspects and learnings from this into their life and kind of show them that they can do it as well if they want. If they're the person listening to this, as you were sitting on the sofa watching projects and people put together these incredible challenges, but not everybody is going to get to run the length of Europe. Not many people have the ability to do that. Not many people are going to have just the want to do it.
Yeah.
So what would be that one thing that you've learned out of this project that you would relay to everybody listening right now that maybe they can apply to their lives?
It's difficult to do that in one.
I know.
I'd say that the first thing is just like make a little discovery of like who you are and what you like based off your past. Like look at your past and see all the things that you're naturally good at. Don't think you need to know all the answers to everything before starting. Starting is way better than thinking you know everything and over planning and like killing yourself mentally. Like I would just say a bit of blind faith goes a long way, and just getting it started is very important. Yeah, I think actually those two. I think you as a person and a bit of blind faith.
You get a buy one get one free here, mate.